Mother's Day again. My daughter has been texting me. She started at 7 o'clock Chicago time this morning. You know, love really runs deep, doesn't it? Because you gotta smile, you gotta say, oh, isn't that wonderful? But I love the last message she sent me. She said, I believe in love at first sight. Because when the first person I saw when I opened my eyes when I was born was you. Isn't that beautiful? So here we are on Mother's Day. And my topic this morning is somebody left the gate open. Somebody, you know, when you hear those words, it sounds like the words I used to hear as a child, you know, when I was being scolded by my mother. She's saying, who left the door open? You know, who left that gate unlocked? Okay? So those words could actually sound like a reprimand, couldn't they? And yet, there's this great Citibank commercial, and I know you've all seen it, where this woman is climbing to the very top of some very beautiful red rocks. It looks like Sedona. And she gets to the very top of the mountain, and she stands up and she asks this question. She says, how did I get here? And then you hear in the background the words to this song being sung. Somebody left the gate open. Wow. And when you hear it this way, you hear it a whole different way, don't you? It has a whole different meaning. It's anything but a reprimand. It's almost a promise, isn't it? It's almost a promise that there is more available to each and every one of us if we're willing to keep moving forward, if we're willing to be open and receptive to it. So she's standing at the top of this mountain, and she's broken through all kinds of barriers to get to that top. And she's there because somebody left the gate open. Ah, wow. In order for her to accomplish that. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. I want to talk about some of the wonderful people who have left the gate open for each and every one of us. Some of the wonderful people and their wisdom that they have shared with us that have enabled us to climb that mountain. Some very remarkable people. And pay attention to that word remarkable, because I'll probably come back to that this morning. So today is Mother's Day. And I'm going to talk about mothers in a way that maybe you've never heard before. It's very different. Because our birth on this planet placed us at the starting gate, at that gate that was left open for each and every one of us. And what I recognize, and I mentioned this earlier, is that we've all been mothered by some very remarkable people in our lives, whether they were our biological relatives or not. Even if it wasn't our biological mother, we've had some amazing people who have stepped in and given that love, that compassion, that encouragement, that guidance that we've needed in life. And they've stepped in at just the perfect time to help us to that next step. My mother's been gone for about 18 years, and yet I'm still being mothered by so many people today with that love, that compassion, that encouragement, that guidance. So it never stops. If we're open and receptive to it, it never needs to stop. And if you've never experienced, then the only thing I have to tell you is open up. Open up. Because the universe will and must provide it if you're open and receptive to it. I had an amazing mother. Sarah, you've heard me talk about Sarah before. And she raised me up. She raised me up good. She really did. But she was a very strong woman, very strong. And I had to tell you something. She thought metaphysics and the science of mind was the biggest pile of hooey that she had ever heard of in her life. She did. And that's putting it mildly, because I can't really share the words that she called it, okay? Because my mother had kind of a spicy vocabulary, okay? But the fact that she was such a strong woman who was always right, made it even more difficult for me to embrace a philosophy like the science of mind. Made it very tough for me, because I could constantly hear her voice in my mind saying, don't ever let anybody tell you that. Don't let anybody tell you don't have to do that in order to have that. I can still, even now, I hear, okay, Sarah, I got it, okay? Okay. So some people had previous religious teachings to overcome. I had Sarah, okay? That's just the truth of it. I had Sarah, but Sarah was very sharp. She was very sharp. She was clear in her physical, in her linear thinking, okay? She was an intellectual master, okay? And she represented, I realized, after she passed on, I realized that she represented the John the Baptist consciousness within me. Now, what does that mean? In the Bible, John the Baptist represents the intellect. In John 3:30, John is saying he, meaning Jesus or the Christ consciousness, he must increase. And I, meaning the intellect, must decrease. All right? So is that intellectual influence that my mom was, she played an amazing role in my life, because she solidified that intellect within me. And I honor her for that today. She wasn't wrong. She was spot on for the paradigm that she was living in. And that paradigm was so strong that it solidified me in my intellect, and I will never toss that intellect. Okay? Yet, her teaching, what she taught me, deposited me right at the gate of my spiritual consciousness. The gate that was wide open for me, the gate that had been left open not just for me, but for every single one of us when we were ready to take the next step. Somebody left the gate open. And one of those somebodies for me was Dr. Ernest Holmes. I never met him, and yet I know him so well. You have no idea. You know, when I read the textbook, it's as if Ernest is talking directly to me. He even calls me by name. He says, now, Dar, I know this one's going to take you a little longer, so just relax, Dar, and listen to what I'm saying. But it feels like he's talking directly to me. And when I started reading him, I couldn't figure out why he was saying the things that he was saying. It sounded like wonderful information. It was great information that he was sharing, but what did it have to do with my life? Anybody feel like that when you started reading the textbook? What does this have to do with me? You know, mind is matter and solution, and matter is mind and form. Other way around. But anyway, it was like, but you know, you said, well, that's great, but you know, what does that have to do with me? And finally, I realized that he was giving me principles that if I applied them in my life, these principles could help me strip away the limits of the physical realm. He kept saying over and over and over again, that we live in a spiritual and mental universe. And I kept saying, well, what does that mean? Why is that important? Because he was teaching me that once I recognized that, I could begin to strip away all the limits of the physical that I myself had imposed on myself. Yes, I know. I've been waiting for that. Thank you. Okay, so the reason these principles were so powerful that he was sharing was because they're true. And they're not true just some of the time. They're always true. See, and that's the thing that makes them so powerful, that at any moment that we decide to turn away from what we're looking at and turning back to principle, that principle will help us to climb that mountain. So Ernest Holmes, he told me some things. He told me some things. And he told me some things about life that just make me laugh when I think about them. Because it strips away all the stress. It strips away all the struggle. It strips away all the strain when I can hear what he's telling me. Some of the things that he has taught me have freed me from the fear of getting sick, as if this is something that has to happen to all of us. He freed me of that idea. He freed me in the belief that of that disease that most of us get. I call it the OSD disease. What is OSD? We get old, then we get sick, then we die. OSD. Now just imagine, can you imagine going through your entire life with that expectation? Can you imagine that as you move through life, this is what you have to look forward to? You get old, you get sick, you die. So he freed me of that idea. He freed me of the idea that had to happen. He freed me of the fear of lack and limitation, because he told me, he said, Dar, bondage is not God ordained. And the first time he said it, I heard him. It went straight to my heart. I had to work with it. He had to leave that gate open for a while, but I could hear what he was saying. He said, I'm going to leave this gate open for you, Dar. And you can use this information any way you choose to use it. It's completely up to you. It's any mountain you decide to climb. No matter what it looks like, it's your mountain. And in using these principles enable you to master the very law that has been mastering you up till now. The very law that has been mastering you can master this law. You can direct it instead of feeling like some puppet on a string, if you're willing to use these principles that I'm giving you. So what else did he teach me? He taught me about the omnis. Okay? He said, there's a power here, Dar, a power that's omnipresent. And what that means, Dar, is that this power has to always be right where you are. There is never a time where love, light, power, peace, joy, prosperity, freedom, health, wholeness, wisdom, harmony, and truth are not right where you are in an infinite state, without a limit of any kind. There's never a time when you could be somewhere where that isn't. And then he taught me about omniscience. He said, this power, Dar, is omniscient. It knows how to do anything that you direct it to do. It can do it. And he said, the funny thing about omniscience, this all known, and that's what omniscience means, the funny thing about omniscience is that we can't outthink it. There's nothing that we could call forth that this universe cannot provide. There's nothing that we could call forth that this universe doesn't know how to do. Wow. And then he said, Dar, now take this one slowly. But recognize that this power is omnipotent. It is all power. And not only is it all power, it is the only power. There is no other power. If you are seeing any other power, Dar, you're in duality, he said. And if there's no other power, then there's nothing ever for this power to overcome. Uh-oh, did you hear that? If there's no other power, then there's never something for this power to overcome. There's only one thing here. Okay, and if it's one thing, then what is the omnipotence of it? Its ability to change forms. Its ability to change into what we're ready to see next. That's the omnipotence of this power. So he said, yeah, I know, Dar. It may take you a little while to get this one. It may take you a little time to begin to see one where you've been seeing two. But I can promise you, Dar, that when you make the two one, your whole life will change. When you make the two one, when you stop seeing health and sickness, when you stop seeing prosperity and lack, when you stop seeing love and hate, Dar, your whole life will change. Then you will know the kingdom of heaven. Wow. See, but when you see it, you will know it. You will understand it. You will feel it deep within yourself. And you will begin to climb that mountain. In the philosophy of Ernest Holmes, he said, what do we teach? It is very simple. God is all there is. That's it. He said, there isn't anything else. There never was and never will be. That is what I am. There is nothing else I can be. I am compelled to be that. Amen. I know. And what do I know about being compelled to be that? Now take those words, because those words, that's a principle. God is all there is. Take those words and understand what he's saying, and it will help you to climb that mountain. What we recognize when we realize that we are compelled to be that is that God isn't broke, God isn't sick, and God doesn't die. So, if I am made in the image and after the likeness of God, then the truth of me is that I am not broke, I am not sick, and that I can never die because I am an immortal, eternal being. Yes. Somebody left the gate open. And it's wide open. It's wide open for each and every one of us to start climbing that mountain. Yes. Yes.